Um, so this first story I'm going to read is about arriving in Los Angeles from Indiana as a young boy. It's called Googies. It had been a long, hard cross-country drive west in our boat-like 1960s Mercury cruiser. My parents could only cover a few hundred miles a day because my brother and I were always hungry or bored or needed to pee. After a half day of driving, my father would finally give in, check us into a roadside motor hotel where we would swim, eat burgers, bounce like monkeys between beds in the musty room, and then fall into exhausted sleep. The final stretch had seemed an eternity of highway, parched plains, tin-badged sheriffs wanting payments for, we suspected, manufactured infractions, and then the haunted moonlit expanse of the Mojave Desert. My parents had purchased an after-factory AC for our new car, a rare luxury for the time, but because of it, the car was endlessly overheating. Knowing nothing about such things, my college professor father opened the hood, cars roaring past us in the starry night. He pulled out his handkerchief, loosening the radiator cap, unleashing a boiling geyser of water that blew 10 feet into the air. He howled into the night like a wounded animal. My mother applied Vicks VapoRub there in case my brother or I fell ill to his badly blistered forearm, and we continued on into the desert expanse. So after all that, it was a relief to have finally arrived, to be in Los Angeles. We pulled in at midnight off the Harbor Freeway, our legs stiff, our butts numb. Rolling down the windows brought the distant roar of traffic, which I imagined to be the ocean. The breeze carried with it the smell of oranges and dust and other new and indefinable things. And downtown LA wasn't much back then, almost a ghost town by night. My brother whispered over to me, "It's not very nice here, is it? Not like Indiana." My mother peered out into the solitary darkness, involuntarily gathering her coat around her. I watched her tired face, lit in pale fluorescence, reflected in the car's window glass. And once again, my brother and I needed a snack and had to pee. A diner at the corner of Pershing Square glowed in the distance like a solitary oasis, neon red and fluorescent white splashing out onto the dark, oily streets. Googies, the two O's of the sign forming curious cartoon eyes. Cruising past, we saw solitary men inside, hunched on red naugahyde stools, nursing cups of coffee and maybe a slice of pie. I wondered what people were doing out at that hour and all alone. "I'm not taking the children in there," my mother said as we pulled up to the curb. "It's full of bums." My father, tired from the road and his arm still raw, growled back, "If they get hungry enough, they'll get used to it." We were the only family in the place, the young waitress giving us a booth by the window. The unearthly brightness and neon trim felt like a space station. At a nearby stool, a man nervously traced a finger along the pastel shapes etched in the countertop, stubbing out the last of a cigarette and then lighting another. But after a fountain coke, a grilled cheese, and fries, all felt right again with the world. Even my father seemed in better spirits. We checked into our hotel, the Cloud Motel, just west of downtown. The room smelled of stale cigarettes and bleach, but a glowing swimming pool hummed in the center courtyard, its lattice of turquoise light dancing in invitation. The next morning, we all went sightseeing, billowing LA clouds against a painfully blue sky, impossibly tall palms swaying in the breeze, and the jacaranda trees in full purple bloom. It was before the era of smog, and the downtown gleamed like Oz. When we came back to our room later that afternoon, though, we found my mother's dresses and blouses inexplicably stuffed into a plastic trash can in the hall outside the door. My father's face tightened in rage. Like a detective, he slowly unlocked the door of our room. Inside, three men in their underwear sat at a small round table, smoking cigars and playing cards. Their wiry black chest hair spilled out from white-ribbed undershirts, and a lone woman lounged on a far chair, her legs crossed, wearing nothing but a bra and panties. "What the hell are you doing in my room?" my father snarled. "What the hell are you doing in my room?" a man who appeared to be the leader of the group shot back. My father spun out to the hall, grabbed the trash can filled with my mother's clothes, emptied the contents into the trunk of our Mercury, and then headed for the hotel office. My brother and I stood outside with my mother, her arms wrapped around us. Inside the glass enclosure, we saw my father waving his arms, his mouth contorting into vague obscenities. In response to something the desk clerk said, my father drop kicked the plastic trash can clear across the office lobby. He'd never been good at sports, but it was an impressive shot. Minutes later, he emerged with a new room key. There's a convention nearby, he said, his face still red, and they needed the larger rooms. It's apparently how they do things here, but we're getting the new room for free, and for the rest of the week. I looked at my parents as we made our way to the new room, trying to decide from their expressions whether this turn of events was a good thing or a bad thing. My father suggested we all put on our suits and go for a swim. Welcome to LA, he said. So, Michelle, do I? How much time do I have? I have another one about that same, length that I could do, or not.
Yes,
We're good.
perfect. Yes.
Okay. All right. Okay. This next one is an excerpt of a longer piece about my days as a European busker with my brother. And the story starts out in Paris and then makes its way to Berlin. And this is during the Berlin portion of it. Let's Go Berlin had mentioned a cool coffee house club that featured nightly music. It was the peak of the new wave '80s and just after Bowie's Berlin period, so I figured they'd know how to do music right. The place was packed, smoke filled, with people necessarily sharing tables. The girl next to us was about our age, long, almost LA surfer blonde hair, with wire-framed glasses and penetrating blue eyes. Petra, she smiled as we sidled into the cramped space. A young, bearded singer was in the middle of an intense song sung in German, his delivery acid and Elvis Costello-like over new wave bar chords. There was something entirely German about the song and the cadence, with strange theatrical hints of Brecht Weil. Sensing my interest, Petra whispered a translation of the chorus. He says that he will not change his song to make it in Berlin. Not one word. I like it, I whispered back, and he shouldn't. During a break in the music, we learned it was open mic night and that they were still taking sign-ups. Damn, I wish I'd brought my guitar, I said, but it's back at the hotel. Petra asked where we were staying and seemed to know the area. I could see mental gears turning. I am here on bicycle, she noted. It's big and it's heavy and might even work with three. You could sign up now, then I could take you guys to get your guitar. I looked back at her. Yeah, let's give it a try, I said. Petra rode and steered. My brother sat on the handlebars and I sat on the rack behind, one arm around her waist to keep from falling off and the other holding my guitar. We cycled past a group of young women, done up for what seemed a night on the town. Meow, one of them said to us, paw in the air. Hookers, explained Petra. We made it back just in time for our slot. Petra's goateed boyfriend Klaus had just gotten off a late night university class. He bought us rounds and then lit up a jeton, holding it the German way. And then it was our turn. Scanning the smoky blue depths, I hammered out the opening chords of Psycho Killer, making it extra raw, rhythmic, letting things ring. The crowd recognized the intro and began clapping in unison. My brother prowled the stage like Mick Jagger, hugging the mic with both hands, sometimes going down on one knee, his eyes manic, almost possessed. When we got to the chorus, the crowd joined in. Psycho Killer, qu'est-ce que c'est? Fa 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 fa. It was supposed to be just one song per group, but as we left the stage, the crowd began stamping for an encore. We were halfway back to our seats, but the clatter continued. Petra and Klaus urged us on with their eyes. They seemed to know how things worked. So we jumped back up on stage and then broke into Pump It Up. Once again, the crowd joined in on the chorus. Pump it up until you can feel it. Pump it up when you don't really need it. My brother drew out the lines like Elvis C., belting them at the end. Don't really need it. You don't really need it. That was wonderful, said Petra, kissing me on the cheek as we came back to our seats. See, now aren't you glad we got your guitar? I am, I said, still breathless. Thank you. She looked back at me with an expression that I still remember, knowing and longing. I felt her side glances on me from time to time. But after several more songs, Klaus whispered to her in German, and she whispered something back. We have to go, she said, turning to me, touching my arm. She looked into my eyes. The four of us hugged. As they headed to the door, Petra glanced back at me, mouthing something I didn't understand. Klaus took her hand, and then they disappeared into the neon night. It was a long way back, but we were still high from our set. The streets were all but deserted. Even the Kit Kat girls had called it a night. The high-rise Mercedes sign led our way, a solitary glowing beacon. We had a morning train to catch back to Paris and decided on a zoo station breakfast to tide us over, another early morning beer buzz. Afterward, there was a good hour to kill before our passage. We wandered the area, once more coming upon the Berlin Wall. I kiddingly suggested plugging in, blasting Western rock over to the other side. I don't know, said my brother. I could imagine getting shot from their side or getting arrested on this side. Maybe, I agreed, but I want to see it again. We climbed the wooden observation platform, and to my amazement, it was the same watchtower and the same East German guard from the day before, his Kalashnikov held rigid. Making eye contact, I could tell he remembered me. Still half drunk from the breakfast beer, I delivered an offhand salute and a loopy smile. The grip relaxed on his rifle. He tried to hide it at first, but then broke into a grin himself and returned the salute. I bowed, waved goodbye, and headed back down. We wandered Kurfürstendamm in the gray dawn light, the rush hour crowds beginning to build. A couple ahead caught my eye, strangely formally dressed for the setting and the hour. They looked ragged around the edges, as if they'd been up all night. Something about the man's gait suddenly clicked. I realized that it was the Count and his woman from the night before on the train. They'd made it to Berlin after all, and not much had changed. They began arguing in rapid-fire German. She gestured angrily in his face, shouting something, then flicking a thumb at him off her front teeth. He shoved her away, and she staggered back on her heels, almost going down. Regaining her balance, she came back with a vengeance, slapping him hard across the face. He seemed stunned at first, but then it was as if the blow had sobered him up. He burst out laughing, and she began laughing too. They held hands and continued down the gray dawn boulevard, her head resting on his caped shoulder. The morning mists had begun to part, a slowly lifting veil. We passed the Kaiser Wilhelm Memorial, a blood-red sun threading the bombed-out pinnacle of the scarred stone church. I thought back to the club last night, and to Petra. After we'd played, the club owner came over. The next time you are in Berlin, call me. I will book you, he'd said. I caught Petra's glance. She smiled sadly, and then Klaus took her hand to go. And then, whatever she had said to me, we never made it back. Thanks a lot, guys.